We're at a low point in the cryptocurrency space from a shallow analysis perspective, or maybe in a deeper sense, if you can enlighten me. Do you think Bitcoin will rise again?
Yes.
Do you think it will go to take on fiat, to go over $1 million, to go to these heights?
I mean, I think it's possible. And the reason I think it's possible is I think a lot of things might go to $1 million because
inflation.
Right.
That
was an important point, right?
Yes, it's a very important point, yes.
Because you're seeing essentially...
Yes.
Right. The choke pointing on energy is pushing up prices across the board for a lot of things. The supply, China's not doing us any favors with the COVID lockdowns. Putin's not doing the world any favors with this giant war. There's a lot of bad things happening in the physical world, right? You have, when China, Russia, and the US are all, and Europe is, there's folks who are just insane about degrowth and they're against, they're pushing for burning coal and wood, right? So a lot of prices are going up in a really foundational and fundamental way. And with that said, also the dollar is in some ways strengthening against certain other things because a lot of other countries are dying harder, right? Mm-hmm. And you've got riots in Sri Lanka and riots in Panama and riots in, all these places, right? So it's very complicated because you've got multiple different trends going in the same way. Your Bitcoin Maximus would just say infinity over 21 million. And so therefore you print all the dollars, there's only 21 million Bitcoin. So Bitcoin goes to infinity. But it can be something where lots of other currencies die and the dollar is actually exported via stable coins. Mm-hmm. Okay. But I do think
fiat still moves somehow into the cryptocurrencies.
Yeah. I think it's kind of like Microsoft where, Windows is still around, right? Microsoft is still around, still a multi-$100 billion company. He
doesn't mean it. He doesn't mean it. Don't worry. All my machines are Windows and
are they
still boot? Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know a single Mac.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
You are unusual on that.
Yeah.
That's so at least for our.
It's not ideology, just convenience.
Fine. They actually now post Satya, they do make some good stuff, right? Like Microsoft Teams is good, right?
Yeah,
like,
there's a lot of incredible stuff.
Yeah.
And the new CEO has done a lot of innovative things, like GitHub.
Yeah, that's an acquisition, but still, I give them credit for it.
The acquisition, the pivoting of vision and motivations and focus and all that kind of stuff. So, anyway, yes, okay. Microsoft is an analogy, metaphor for something.
Well, yeah. So basically, just like they didn't need a turnaround, but they did endure to the present day. They didn't die from Google app. For the massive attacks on them, they didn't die. They are less powerful, but they make more money, right?
Yes.
And I think that might be something that our best case scenario is the U.S. establishment or CCP has more power over fewer people. Okay,
I see.
And so but you can exit. If you're there, you're kind of knuckling under or whatever, but you can exit, right? And so I mentioned those three poles. CCP is obviously 1 billion people, 1.4 aligned under the digital yuan, and so on, right? NYT is the entire, it's the tech companies, it's the US dollar, it is the establishment, and then crypto capital is everybody else. But I actually think that over time, that third world is Web3 this time, and that's the third pole, and that's India and it's Israel, and it's lots of American conservatives and left libertarians, and it's also lots of Chinese liberals, all the folks who are trying to get out of China because it's become so nationalist and crazy and difficult for capitalism. And so if you take basically non-establishment Americans on both left and right, okay, the bottom two quadrants in the political compass I talked about. You take the liberal Chinese, you take the Israelis and the Indians. Why? Because both of them have a lot of tech talent, right? They're the number one and number two demographics for tech founders. And they want to, while they are generally sympathetic to the West, right? And they have more ties to the West, they also are more cautious about national interest rather than just starting fights, where that's how they would think about it, right? They just, India thinks of itself as a poor country, Israel thinks of itself as a small country, and so therefore it needs to not just get in every fight just for the sake of it, and so need to maintain a cautious distance with China, but not like do what Pelosi is doing and try and start like a big thing, okay? I think Israel is similar, where it's maintaining diplomatic relations with China. It's more friendly towards China than the US is. India and Israel, I think, are two sovereign states that have a lot of globally mobile tech talent that obviously have ties to the West with a large diaspora that are hard to demonize, or in the sense of willing to argue on the internet. Let's put it like that in English, right? It's very important. And them plus enough Americans plus enough Chinese can set up another pole that is not for Cold War or military confrontation, but for peace and trade and freedom and so on and so forth, right? That's the center, as opposed to the, left of the, the woke American U.S. establishment or the right of the ultranationalist CCP, right? That's what I think about. Now, what I would say here is the reason I think these are the kind of the three poles. You can argue against this, right? You can say it's a unipolar world. America's totally dominant. That's one argument. You can say it's a bipolar world. It's just the U.S. versus China. No, everybody else will have to be forced to align with one or the other. Jayashankar, actually explicitly rejected this. He's like, look, there's 1 billion people in India. It's coming up on, it will eventually be like the number 3 economy. It's on the rise. He's got the history and culture. He thinks he's entitled to have, India's entitled to have its own side, right? In such a thing. It's a funny way of putting it, right?
Yeah.
But it's also true. And so you could say it's unipolar, you could say it's bipolar, you could say it's just multipolar, and everybody is kind of there, India, Israel, these groups are out there. But I actually think it's going to be tripolar. And the reason it's tripolar is these 3 pools are the groups that have enough media and money and scale and whatnot to really kind of be self-consistent civilizations. Obviously, China's like the vertically integrated, like Apple or whatever, just like one country.
Maybe a stable ideology.
A stable ideology. That's right. Right. Obviously, the wokes have control of lots of institutions. They've got the U.S. establishment, and they've got the tech companies, they've got the media companies, and so on. But crypto is basically everybody else. And crucially, crypto has inroads in China and America, where it's hard to demonize it as completely foreign because there's many, many, many huge proponents of the universalist values of crypto in America and China, because it is true global rule of law and free speech and, so on. It is genuinely universalist in a way where America can no longer be, the number one rule of the rules-based order is America is always number one. And China doesn't even pretend to maintain a rules-based order, right?
Yes.
Whereas for all those countries that don't want to either be dominated by the US media corporations or social media that can just censor Trump, nor do they want to be dominated by China, this is an attractive alternative, a platform they can make their own, right? So that's where I think, I wrote an article on this in Foreign Policy on, here's 2 articles that talk about this a little bit. It's called Great Protocol Politics. And then here's another one on the sort of domestic thing. Bitcoin is civilization for Barry Weiss, okay? But I want to just come up the stack a little bit and just return to that original point, which I diverged on, which was why I gave the whole example of how we got into China because I talked about how China had gone from communist to capitalist and letting people have just a share of what they owned, right? With social media, we're still in kind of the communist era of social media almost, where whatever you earn on social media, like Google takes its cut, Twitter takes 100%. You earn nothing for all your tweets or anything like that. Not only do you earn nothing, you might get a little rev share on TikTok or YouTube. You can do okay, right? But not only do you earn either nothing or a little bit, you have no digital property rights, even more fundamentally. You are at just the whim of a giant corporation can hit a button and everything you worked for over years, gone. Okay. That is, even if that is, quote, the current state of events, the state of affairs, rather, that is not the right balance of power. To be able to unperson somebody at the touch of a key and take away everything in their digital world when we're living more and more in the digital world, we need a check on that power. And the check on that power is crypto and its property rights and its decentralization, right? And when I say decentralization, I mean your money and your digital property is by default yours. And there has to be a due process for someone to take that away from you. Everything, all work is online. All your money is online. Your presence is online. If that can just be taken away from you with the press of a key, that just gives, bad governments, bad corporations so much power that's wrong, right? Yeah. That's why I'm a medium and long-term bull on crypto, simply because it's a check on this thing. And that if you think about it in terms of just abstract decentralization is one thing, but if you think about it in terms of property rights, it's quite another. And now, what that also means is once you have property rights and you have decentralized social media, it'll be like the explosion of trade that happened after China went from communist to capitalist. Literally billions of people around the world are no longer giving everything to the collective. They own the teeth in their head now, finally. Okay. Yeah. It's funny, right?
Yeah.
So your lexfriedman.eth, you own it. The keys are on your computer. The bad part is, of course, they can get hacked or something like that. Then you can deal with that with social recovery. There's ways of securing keys. But the good part is, ta-da, you actually have property rights in the Hernando de Soto sense. You have something you own, ownership, digital ownership. The cloud is great, but crypto gives you some of the functionality of the cloud while also having some of the functionality of the offline world where you have the keys. So it's a V3, right? It's a continuous theme, right? The V1 was offline. I've got a key. I own it. I have de facto control. V2 is the cloud. Someone else manages it for me. It's hosted. I get collaboration and so on. V3 is the chain where you combine aspects of those, right? You have the global state of the cloud, but you have the local permission and controlling of the private key, okay? So that's why I'm a medium to long-term ultra bull on crypto. And there's a podcast I gave with Asimco where I talked through how crypto actually doesn't just go after finance. So it's gold and it's wire transfers and it's crowdfunding and it's all finance with DeFi, but it's actually also search and it's social and it's messaging. It's actually even operating systems and eventually cloud and whatnot. Do you want me to talk about that briefly?
Yeah. If you can briefly see, so
sure, very briefly.
How broad you see the effect of crypto.
So first, crypto is fundamentally a new way of building backend systems, right? So if you think about how big a deal it was to go from AT&T's corporate Unix to Linux, it's permissionless, right? When you went from, as much as I admire a lot of the stuff that Sam Altman and Greg Brockman have done at OpenAI, I mean, they're phenomenal in terms of research. They've pushed the envelope forward. I give them a ton of credit, right? Still, it was great to see Stable Diffusion out there, which was open source AI, right? Mm-hmm. And so from a developer, from a power user standpoint, whenever you have the unlocked version, like an unlocked cell phone, it's always going to be better, right? So the what crypto gives you, obviously it's every financial thing in the world. You can do stocks, bonds, et cetera. It's not just like the internet wasn't just a channel. It wasn't like radio and TV and internet. It was internet radio and internet TV and internet this and internet that. Everything was the internet. All media became the internet. Mm-hmm. Crypto is not an asset class. It's all asset classes. It's crypto stocks and crypto bonds, et cetera. In a real sense, like private property arguably didn't exist in the same way before crypto. International law didn't exist before crypto. How are you going to do a deal between Brazil and Bangladesh? If a Brazilian company wants to, acquire a Bangladeshi company, they usually have to set up a U.S. adapter in between, because otherwise, what are the tax or the, other obligations between the two? You set up a U.S. adapter or a Chinese adapter to go between. But now that Brazilian and Bangladeshi can go peer to peer because they're using the blockchain, right? They can agree on a system of law that is completely, international, and that's code, so each party can diligence it without speaking Portuguese and Bengali, right? So that's why I am a long-term bull on crypto. I just described the finance case. Let me go through the others, right? Social. So you have the private keys for your ENS. You have apps like Farcaster. You basically have decentralized social media where there's different variants. Some you just log in with your crypto username. Others, the entire social network and all the likes and posts are on chain, like DeSo. But there's several different versions, right? Search. Once you realize block explorers are an important stealth threat to search. They're very high traffic sites like blockchain.com and Etherscan that Google is just totally slept on. They don't have a block explorer. You don't have to do anything in terms of trading or anything like that. Google does not have a block explorer. Why? They don't think of it as search, but it is search. It's absolutely search. It's a very important kind of search engine. And once you have crypto social, you now show that you're not just indexing in a block explorer like on-chain transactions, but on-chain communications. Okay. So now you suddenly see, the entire social web that Google couldn't index. It could only index the World Wide Web and not the social web. Now it's actually the on-chain signed web, right? Because every post is digitally signed. It's a new set of signals. It's way easier to index than either the World Wide Web or the social web because it's open and public. So this is a total disruptive thing to search in the medium term because it's a new kind of data set to index, right? So that's how it's a threat to social, to search. It is a threat to messaging. Why? Or it's disruptive eventually because of the ENS name, as I mentioned, is like a universal identifier. You can send encrypted messages between people. That's a better primitive to base it on. WhatsApp is just claiming that they're end-to-end encrypted. But with an ENS name or with a crypto name, you can be provably, audibly end-to-end encrypted because you're actually sending it back and forth, right? Because the private key is local, right? That itself, given how important that is, right? You could man-in-the-middle Signal or WhatsApp because there's a server there, right? If you have, so end-to-end encrypted messaging will happen, and with payments and all this other stuff, okay? So you get the crypto messaging apps. You get operating systems. Why? Well, the frontier of operating systems, I mean, look, Windows, Linux, and Mac OS have been around forever. But if you actually think about, what is a blockchain? Well, there's operating systems, there's web browsers. A blockchain is the most complicated thing since an operating system or web browser because it's a kind of operating system. Why? It's got, something like Ethereum has an EVM. It's got a programming language. It's got an ecosystem where people monetize on it. They build front-end apps and they build back-end apps. They interoperate between each other. This is the frontier of operating systems research. Mm-hmm. People haven't thought of it that way, right? It's also the frontier of a lot of things in databases. You will get a crypto LinkedIn where there's zero-knowledge proofs of various credentials, okay? Basically, every single Web 2 company, I can probably come up with a Web 3 variant of it, right? Like Ethereum is, and this is high praise for both parties, but Ethereum is like the crypto Stripe, right? Or the Web 3 Stripe. And you will see versions of everything else that are like this. But, I kind of described search, social, messaging, operating systems, the phone, right? Solana's doing a crypto phone. Why do you want that? Again, digital property. Apple was talking about running some script to find if people were having, CSAM, like child porn or whatever on their phones, right? And even NYT actually reported that like Google ran something like this and found false positives. Some guy had to take a photo of a kid for medical diagnosis. It got falsely flagged as CSAM. He lost access to his account. Total nightmare. Imagine just getting locked out of your Google account, which you're so dependent on, right? Mm-hmm. As more and more of your digital life goes online, is it really that much ethically different if it's the Chinese state that locks you out or an American corporation, right? Basically, it's operationally very similar. You just have no recourse. You're unpersoned, right? So the crypto phone becomes like insanely important because you have a local set of private keys. Those are the keys to your currency and your passport and your services and your life, right? So like becomes something you just hold on you with your person at all times, like your normal phone. You might have backups and stuff, but the crypto phone is an insanely important thing, okay? And so that's search, that's social, that's messaging, that's operating systems, that's a phone. That's a lot right there.
Yeah, that's beautiful.